from Dylan Thomas. And that guy could write. Poetry is what in a poem makes you laugh, cry, prickle, be silent, pay more attention, makes you want to do this or that or nothing, makes you know that your bliss and suffering is forever shared and yet forever all your own. And this one is from Salman Rushdie, another incredible writer. And he says, a poet's work to name the unnameable, to point at frauds, to take sides, start arguments, shape the world, and stop it from going to sleep. The best advice ever given poets, I think, because I write quite linearly. I'm a narrative poet. This comes from Ezra Pound, and he said, use no superfluous word, no adjective, which does not reveal something. The natural object is always the adequate symbol. Go in fear of abstractions. And that's written on a Post-it note on my desk. Go in fear of abstractions. Wonderful advice. And this rather sobering note from Don Marquis, who said, publishing a volume of verse is like dropping a rose petal down the Grand Canyon and waiting for the echo. But sometimes, just sometimes, in a poet's striving and writing and searching, waiting for that returning echo is enough. Thank you for being here with me, all of you, each and every one of you. I wish I could serve lovely little snacks, but alas, the COVID. You'll be happy to know I'm abiding by my number 1 rule out of 10, things not to do at a poetry reading. Number 1, never charge admission. So you're all in luck. I'm going to open with this poem. I just wrote it and I dreamt it. And sometimes that happens. I'll wake up and I'll have dreamt it. The images are there. And then I just put words to it. It sounds simple. It's anything but that's the process generally. This is for Haley, my right-hand woman and my helper tonight. And it's called, she said it was her favorite. The Delicate Dance. Poise and abandon. The art of poetry demands both. So much in life does. The karaoke singer summons both and seizes the microphone. The high diver too, poised on the edge of the Acapulco cliff. The mortician as he confronts human carnage. The golf pro stepping up to a 15-foot putt for the win. It's a high wire act painstakingly perfected over time. Remember that job interview you had and you weren't close to being qualified. You aced it. You got it. The hospice nurse asks, are you ready? And you don't look down. You lie and say yes. The hospice nurse asks, pardon me, are you ready? And you don't look down. You lie and say yes. I'll give a few minutes in between each poem, which was also wonderful advice I got from a poet. I was racing through at a reading, and afterwards he said, may I ask you, are you in a rush? And I said, not intentionally. And he said, well, give people a chance to think about the poem, look out the window, count the stars, just give a couple of minutes in between each piece. So I've never forgotten that advice. It was very good. This is called Watchword, and it's another, really a Bible for anyone living, writing or not. It's called Watchword. Disappearance reminds us to notice, transience to cherish, fragility to defend. In this brief crossing of ours, let us attend to all that we see, heralding all that we find that transcends, not turning away from what we cannot abide, instead denouncing it. We are here to keep watch, not to keep. I'm often asked why my poems are so sad. It's probably the most frequent question I'm asked. And I have two answers ready because I've been asked so often. First is, I agree with the poet Shelley, who said, our sweetest songs are those that tell of saddest thought. And who am I to question him? And the second best reason, sadness has taught me 1,000 times more in my life than happiness ever did. This is called Enough's Enough. I should have bought gold, written that idea down, paid more attention, slept less. I wonder lately where everyone has gone, why the most important never quite makes the list, and why enormous changes are so often required at the very last minute, with no warning given. I wonder why I stood by. I wonder, and this most of all, if even for a moment I made someone happy. This piece is called Life Has No Map. Life has no map, only a series of cryptic signposts on dimly lit roads. Crossroads aren't even crossroads, just there to force decisions before there is enough information. The glass of the compass has been shattered by one too many interlopers, leaving true north anything but true. Left to take our bearings from lesser guides, we rely on the GPS lady and her robotic monotone, the priest in the pulpit who forgives nothing, Dr. Phil and his waxen-faced wife, who now offers up her own line of anti-aging skincare, developed in laboratories, it would appear, deep beneath the earth's crust. Desperate for direction, we connect the vastly unconnected, begin thinking the GPS lady is speaking directly to us, that the only true absolution lurks within a tiny wooden confessional by way of a disembodied voice, that retinol has something, anything, to do with happiness. This is called Just Once. The elephant demanded. He wondered what it would be like to just once sleep like other people. So he laid his gigantic head down on a pillow instead of resting it atop his knees. Just that once. By morning, he had suffocated under the weight of it. In some people's lives, there are no words for happiness. There are only ones for sorrow. I'm editing as I go here, which I always like to do because nothing's cast in stone. And sometimes the mood dictates what pieces should be read and not. I write a great deal about the randomness of things and how precarious this world of ours is and how fickle And COVID's taught us that, if nothing else. A different doorway chosen, and our lives are inevitably altered, realigned forever. You choose this apartment and not the one down the hall, and all the dominoes fall differently. This is called the spark of serendipity. Fleming left his dirty dishes in the sink and found penicillin. Modern medicine was never the same. The inventor of Coca-Cola just wanted to cure headaches. Velcro, because a dog owner studied the tenacious burrs embedded in his retriever's coat. The most profound discoveries, pure accident. Go looking for one thing and find another, maybe better. On my way to a purebred prize winner, a mongrel butted in. Best dog ever. I thought the invitation said Thursday, and I found you. Leave room for error. Cast off loosely. Await the entirely unexpected. The exquisite gift of the new. Poetry is now as close a church as any that I have, but I had another one for a long time. And I've written a lot about my Catholic upbringing. This one's called No One Owns Eternity. No one owns eternity, but my church managed to hijack the concept to great effect, at least on me. The word itself haunted me as a little girl, kept me awake at night, staring into the pitch, struggling to conceive of the idea no end. The day we were taught about babies not baptized, being doomed to spend eternity in a place called limbo, sealed my sleepless childhood fate. My dreams long after, infiltrated with images of tiny bodies floating in space in the dark, alone, crying, forever. That'll teach them, I thought, terrified in my tiny cold bed. That'll teach them. Ways to pray. There are a million ways to pray. Not one of them has anything to do with a polished oak pew or a man on high in a church pulpit. Nothing special is needed. The quiet is no prerequisite, nor a bowed head. A seat on a New York subway will do. A carnival ride at full tilt, or the middle of nowhere, so still, your breath the only sound. We think more must be required, so we hesitate, we edit, we borrow scripts. But like so much, the opposite is true. A prayer's success lies in it being entirely, unapologetically your own. Be anywhere. Think of what matters. Start with the words, I wish. Consider, I hope. End with, I tried. There was much about my Catholic upbringing that was very positive and really affirming for me. So don't go by these poems. But this third one is called Hard Won. There is no glory in suffering. Father Blackwell got it all wrong. Just ask the young martyrs how much good ever came from their deprivation, their unspeakable deaths. The suicide bomber looking up at the sun on his final walk. What is his family's honor to him then? My father grasping at air for his tissue paper lungs, graciously succumbing. What greater good was ever served? The faithful dog who licks his master's hand only to be beaten again. The teenage mother who surrendered her baby girl from her hospital bed. When she spots a photo on a subway poster years later and stares into a face hauntingly like her own. Ask her as her heart breaks yet again, who did as she was told. Where is the glory now? I've returned to this theme time and again, how people and events are never quite the way we imagine them or are told they are. And we have to bring our own instincts and judgment to bear. This one's called Face Value. John Wayne hated horses, took a truck whenever he could. Esther Williams detested the feel of water, couldn't wait to dry off after every shot. Dr. Seuss was annoyed by children, their unpredictability. I bet you Bieber hates his own music. Whatever you think is true about anyone, turn it on its head, then flip it again. You'll be closer. Next, I'll be telling you Marilyn Monroe hated sex, but I bet you a year of Hollywood's grosses, she did. It gets worse. The flawless model, photoshopped. The philanthropist cheats on his taxes. The environmentalist cannot live without AC. The priest, I hate to say it, the priest's no saint either. And come on, no one throws it back like the prohibitionist. Make it easy. Assume everyone is revealed only through a prism. Tease out a viewing angle with the least distortion. And even then, this is something I think sometimes when I read a really wonderful poem. I wrote this. After you read a poem, just knowing you can hold it. You can be in that space of the poem and it can hold you in its space. And you don't have to explain it. You don't have to paraphrase it. You just hold it and it allows you to see differently. This is a poem for Dear Brooke. For keeps. Why did I not grab every moment and make it sing? Look into people's faces and find stories there to take me into my old age. We don't take the time, do we? Blithely, we pass untraveled roads, agonizing instead about the minutiae of our lives, pairs and doubles, the matched sets of things. What will we leave? Fragments of ourselves, not the real thing, the thing underneath it all that makes our hearts beat, gives breath to our dearest self. That which is the best of us somehow gets muddled, then irrevocably lost in our blind rush towards the rest. Why did I not grab every moment and make it sing? I've written, and I'm not alone in saying I've written so much through COVID, especially in the beginning. I was dreaming a lot, and I'm sure some of you have the same thing. I was dreaming so vividly. I mean, I practically had opening and closing, credits, curtains opening. I mean, it was really a time. So I'm going to share with you some of the ones I wrote. And this one is called One Name. It is dizzying, numbing in truth. Front page of Sunday's New York Times. 1,000 names, printed in rows. They blur together. We shut down when faced with such staggering loss. Among them, this one. New father, Israel Sows, 22, of Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, who will never know the face of his son. Israel Sows, 22, whose boy will take his first step without him and his first turn at bat, who will ask about the father he never knew, to learn they shared a love for poetry and a mean curveball, that his father batted with his left hand, just like him. His father, Israel Sows, whose poems went unwritten. Israel Sows, who never held his son. This is called I Need. Oh, and Lynn O'Donnell asked me to read this, and I'm happy to. Lynn, out in Nova Scotia. I need January in northern Canada to be a kinder version of its loathsome self. I need tonight's sleet to make up its mind and become snow. I need to stay in bed all day tomorrow to know who to ask for permission. I need a way to shut down my persistent COVID dream, myself, maskless, bobbing in a roiling sea. All around me, spiked, bejeweled crowns, multiplying. I need to renounce the whole world or embrace it unconditionally. I need to suspend derision, close my eyes, open wide my arms. I need the ice to melt and the water to once again wear the colors of the air. This is called Her Other Half. Her twin sister's ashes were waiting for her collection at a contactless drive-through. In a bag now beside her on the front seat for the dazed ride home. Her sister, who had last week sat in that seat and beseeched her to change the radio station because she hated Enya, pulled the visor mirror down and applied her signature Maybelline lip gloss. Not that anyone will see these, she sighed, smacking her lips playfully. Then, suggesting a stop at the Burger King drive-through. Come on, sweets, I'm buying. Who could conceive all that COVID extorts from us? There may be savageries more heinous than this. The separating of 20-year-old twins without allowing them even a goodbye. But absolutely none come to mind. We all have things we miss through COVID and continue to miss. And this is just a few of them. This is called Imaginings. What is this world of yours you speak of, where people touch without nerve or caution, stand shoulder to shoulder, dance cheek to cheek, join hands in circles at weddings, share spoons and pieces of cake, whisper secrets up close, Hold elevator doors. Share with me this world you speak of. Spare no detail. None. Help me to imagine. This is a particularly nasty dream I had. So I'll share it with you. It's called Captive Audience. The world is sharing a recurring dream. Every night we fall asleep and take up the very same challenge. All of us are running for our lives across a parched landscape, shoulder to shoulder in an endless line. An elusive shape pursues us from behind. We know not why. All we know as we race forward is the person next to us breathing, and the thunder of our thousands of feet pounding the ground beneath. Some of us tire more easily, falter, rest, start again. We are united in a common purpose, in knowing there is nothing for us but the outrunning of this together. Every time we glance backward, the specter looms closer, changing shape with each turn of our heads. 1 minute, a tumbleweed, 6 stories high, made not of brush, but of thick, snarled barbed wire. Next, feral beasts snapping at our heels. And above our heads, outsized birds of prey filling the skies, circling ever closer. Tomorrow night, our predator will reappear, transformed yet again. In this same dream, all of us share a wish to awaken in our beds tomorrow morning, having returned to the world we once so blithely shared. Each of us knowing it was all of it, only a dream. And finally, this is called Once Trite, Now Wise. The everyday extraordinary abounds, as it ever did, biding its time until we stop, until we notice. The tiny, unheralded jewels nested within our daily lives that we rushed past, cavalier, oblivious, with no time for the smaller movement, the goal less. We were hell-bent on destinations. There were judgments to render, paint colors to choose, texts to send. The bestseller, the top 10, none of which we remember 5 minutes after. Now, pause to discover it is not only the peony in breathtaking full bloom that deserves our time. Bend down and inspect the tightly wrapped, sleek, sleeping bud, just as it is, soon to swarm with the manic aphids that will allow it to be all it can be. Watch the dog watching the squirrel. The clouds above change shape the minute you look away. The supermarket cashier will remember your smile. It's not the goal, it's the journey. Once I thought trite, now wise. This is for the scientists and the researchers and the people who are going to help us through this. It's called Praise the Lost. They lead us down different corridors, have us questioning every easy choice, pushing open doors we'd have passed cavalierly. See us behind them, peeking warily behind forbidden barriers, our boxed goals and surefire solutions, our comfort with the way of things all thrown to the wind. Praise the lost. these unheralded secret agents of revolution. Trust they lead us to better. Embrace their doggedness in going deeper, these restless, unconvinced souls. In their heroic quest for something more, they force us to look up from our ledgers, lift our chins to the skies, and join them. We're shaped by everyone we meet in infinitesimal ways. And the ones that we meet and then lose, we are never quite the same afterwards. This is called All the Silent Girls. I realize now, decades later, they were the abused ones, the misused ones, the girls in the back seats of cars, willing, hungry, any attention would do, the ones boys called with a self-satisfied wink, easy, when what they were was lost. Most of them, I lay you odds, struggling for air under the thumb, the boot of a distant father, sinister uncle, stern boyfriend. Silent, for none would listen. Silent, for whom would believe? All the sad girls, the voiceless girls, carrying unseen yokes on their frail backs to the end of their days, then down, powerless, down into their uneasy graves. The people we meet. This is called Washed Away. Rushing into a truck stop, 3 a.m., a quick restroom visit, coffee, gas. I stand alongside her. She leans in deeply over a sink, peering in the mirror, wide-eyed under the fluorescent light. I try not to stare. She's washing her face with the bright green soap from the wall dispenser, pumping out more and more, lathering it up until her face. Her diaphanous gown grazes the floor. Her silver heels are perilously high. She may be 17. Do you want some coffee? Some food? I ask, quietly. She turns to me, her face traced with suds. No, thank you, ma'am. In a tone that efficiently heads off anything more. She needed to eat. Her face must be stinging by now. She'll snag her dress on those heels. No doubt many of you listening have your own stories. When we discover that all we can do is just not enough. This is called something called key. My friend made an appointment with the city's much acclaimed doctor of Eastern medicine, way down on the Danforth above the Roots store. He opened the session by counseling her vehemently via his earnest translator to keep the nape of her neck guarded at all times in order to guard against the marauders, the incoming toxins. She hadn't even removed her coat. This guy meant business. First, he asked her to stick out her tongue, a diagnostic tool esteemed among Eastern prognosticators, the sight of which prompted from him a screed in Mandarin. It seemed her tongue was seemingly the wrong color and texture, not to mention tone. This a surefire flag to her malaise, something called her key, entirely out of whack, but you pronounce it chi. The ancient art of cupping came next. She followed orders, open to all of it. This woman who once scoffed at yoga, calling upon the ancients now, flipping onto her back wordlessly, bare from the waist up. The click and then the hiss of the Bic lighter as the small discs of thick, clear glass were heated, then placed on her back in turn, one replacing another in swift succession. A lengthy script for a herbal concoction came next, to be purchased in Chinatown, Mondays and Wednesdays only, and call first. I used to think chemo was bad, she joked at their next session, confessing she could not choke down even one more drop of his prescribed brew, its smell alone prompting memories of a dismal sheep farm we had worked on together years ago in New Zealand. The doctor's final words were succinct. No pepper, no spices, nothing hot, he admonished. It takes time. Time, he counseled, his hand gently upon hers, clarifying for my friend what in the end no one in the East nor the West was able to give her. Elizabeth Barrett Browning advised poets with 3 words: hold nothing back. Here goes. This is called In Case We Never Meet. In case we never meet, you ought to know I was kind to children and small animals, and never was there a morning I awoke without underlying sadness. That I overtipped waitresses at breakfast especially, hated small talk, fought a compulsion to read the last page of a book first, loved a great many people, but not at parties, and not all at once. You ought to know I pick at my cuticles even when they bleed. I miss smoking every single day, even 25 years on. I am scared of the dark, yet fiercely drawn to it. That I yearn for something I can never quite identify, and fear I never will. Broken hearts and what they teach us. Turns out quite a lot. But does it have to hurt quite so much each and every time? Sitting duck. Everybody loves a train at a distance, explains you and me perfectly. The champion of the dine and dash, calling for the check too soon. Methodically, diabolically, keeping me off balance. Plans were vague coming from you, up for sudden, inexplicable change. There was always someone on hold, someone in your lobby waiting, drumming their fingers. Even when alone, we were never quite alone. Off kilter, off guard, I grew expert in the art of rationalization, the game of catch up. It seemed you were always rounding a corner in the distance, the moment I glimpsed sight of you, the belt of your flawlessly tailored trench coat flapping behind you as you ran. Smoke signals. How can you not think of me in winter when afternoons dwindle on in grayness, remembering our summers spent wrapped together? not miss me late at night in the absolute stillness. Nothing stands between you and your memories of me. Don't you have moments when the pain is too much? When you get tired of saying onwards? When you get tired of alone? Don't you want to etch my name onto frosted windows, carve it in the bark of trees, trail it in smoke across skies, shout it at will, as if by doing so, I will magically come again, having been beckoned with such longing. One of the first poems I ever published, I was paid $25, and I think I felt like I had been transported directly to heaven. Traffic. Today, the streets were gray with rain, and the sight of a car that looked like yours stopped me in my tracks. I know that when I see you again, you will be remote, mildly interested, and unscarred. Still, I look for you everywhere, and even the sound of your name releases a flood of remembering. If we're lucky, there are moments in our lives when things become crystallized, and that in those moments, our decisions for us, and it somehow allows us to move forward. Let me tell you about one of mine. This is called Exactly When I Changed Everything. It was the night the water pump blew on my Datsun, to be exact, heading out into a sudden snowstorm late on a Sunday evening, leaving you standing at your apartment door in your bathrobe. Me as briskly independent as ever, you as oblivious. With a breezy drive safe, your send-off. In the elevator, seething that you had allowed me to go, waiting, hoping you would head me off, just like in the movies. The gauges on my car dashboard went haywire just as I was turning onto the freeway, my temperamental car flailing to a stop on the snow-choked shoulder. Flagging down a passing car, the wind merciless, the interminable wait for the tow truck. Two guys in the front seat smoking, black crows blasting from their outsized speakers. Always the same two guys, it seems. Hooking up the derelict car, squeezing into the front seat alongside them, inching through the blizzard to the waterfront, and the only garage still open. Where I rushed to the washroom in the back, the predictable bare bulb over the nasty sink, the walls lined with crude magazine photos. I cleared away the grime from the mirror, succumbing, finally, to tears that would not be held back. Despite my clouded reflection, staring at me that Sunday night, in that frigid, repulsive back room, I saw all too clearly the wrong car, the wrong guy, the wrong life. Maybe a couple more. Haley, how's my time? Yes, 7:45, maybe a couple more. We read each other's minds. Okay, let me just see here, make it count. I think I'll do,
May I make a request?
sorry?
May I make a request?
Oh, of course.
Could you read Island Dog?
Island Dog, of course.
Thank you.
For Scott, where is it? Of course, I'll read Island Dog. And Scott, for my gentle, sweet brother Scott, too. He had asked, it's his favorite. The Island Dog. He is everyone's, yet no one's. Vacationers arrive, discover him, dote on him for 2 weeks, then disappear. He is their holiday project, a story they'll tell over dinner at home. Some allow him in, to sleep at the foot of their beds, to guard their front door. Some even toy with the idea of a rescue. Could we? Should we? Shots? Papers? Questions asked with the exuberance of the relaxed and the happy. But as the time to leave draws near, reality encroaches. The idea stalls. A new band takes their place. The island dog waits, knowing it will take only one to give him a name that won't change, one to call out in the dark should he wander too far, one to call to him and him alone, come home. Okay, one more, two more? What do you think? This piece acknowledges all of the disappointments and the vagaries and the hearts torn in two, and yet holding out reasons to hope anyway and to carry forward. It's called Minor Defects Will Not Affect Where. How can you care not for this earthly life, even with its vagaries, its ragtag beginnings, unspeakable endings? Remember, latte at the corner cafe that late afternoon arrived as the autumn light dappled your newspaper, just so. Intertwined hearts up the foam, courtesy of the beaming waitress who announced she was getting married. You sometimes reach the bus just in time. Blood tests come back perfectly normal. Simple mini lights transform a sad house. A fresh fall of snow perfects a neglected yard. Awaken to the delights of the here and now. The two-legged terrier with the tailor-made chassis in tow. The tired little girl in the shopping cart who smiles back. A favorite Phil Collins song on the car radio in the pouring rain. There are blessings. They must be heeded. It doesn't get better. It just may be enough. One more. And then I'll take questions and answers. Oh, yes. How's this for a bizarre title to a poem? Cleaning David Bowie's apartment. It was like any other apartment on my roster, untidy, untended. They all looked the same. Tea stains mottled the kitchen sink, and the predictable, sad bathtub ring. The piano where Major Tom was probably composed sat in a corner, unremarkable, save for its one chipped key. The bedroom, too, tedious. A tacky Gothic headboard, pilled flannel sheets, an overcrowded bedside table, bathroom towels mismatched, haphazardly strewn, kids' toys littering the floors and surfaces. Not one of them I hadn't seen already back home in the monotonous Canadian suburbs. I don't know what I expected. Just not ordinary. I cleaned ordinary all day long. Perhaps a zigzag lightning bolt slashed in neon across the shower wall. The tiny golden head of a Grammy statue poking out from the back of a bookshelf. Violet satin pajamas precisely folded atop a matching pillowcase with Bowie emblazoned on both. in sequence. Truth be told, Ziggy, I still hoped for a glimpse of something after wringing out my mop for the last time, perhaps suddenly rising in the air all around me amid the motes of dust, the sudden twinkling shimmer of stardust. Thank you for listening.
Do question and answers now, or questions and comments. Start it off. I have a question from Doug. He wants to know, how has the most disastrous moment in your life affected your poetry?
I think I said earlier on, that's a great question, Doug. The saddest moments in my life, the most trying times, have made me just dig deeper and try to recreate the depth of the feeling. And, you know, words are all we have. And in a poem, you have so few compared to prose, which is what I love about it, which is what I love about poetry, because it's so lean. It has to be so lean and mean. And so, yeah, my worst moments, my lowest moments, I've been able to sit down and just dive into them. And it's helped me. It's a sanctuary. It's a way to figure out how I think about what's happened, how I think about my life, and how I see myself in the world. I don't know how I'd have managed without it.
Great. Scott's raised his hand, so take it away, Scott.
I have a question.
Yes.
Go ahead.
What was it like without the audience participation, without the feedback at the end of the poems for you?
It was really quiet and lonely. And I'm wondering, this is the first time I've done this with a good sized group. And I'm wondering, it's a good question, Scott. Scott's my baby brother. He's 6'4", but he's still my baby brother. I just think that the next time I might just have everybody unmuted. I mean, even if that's kind of a cacophony, I think it might be better. I'm going to think about that, because I would like to do this again.
It wasn't bad as listening. It was just nice to just listen to you. I might have felt lonely for you, but as listening, it was just nice to listen to you and not be distracted by any other noise. Lynn's asking, do you write more when happy or sad?
Good question, Lynn. When I'm happy, I'm eating too many Snickers bars, and I'm out looking for vintage clothes and riding around and watching really bad TV. When I'm sad is when I write. And it seems it's just part of the exercise, part of the process. It might vary. I know that not all poets need that, but I really have to be in the slough of despond, and then I can sit down and try and piece something together.
I'm really curious about the whole process of writing poetry. I know that it comes from a very deep place, and it needs to be expressed through your heart and your mind and your soul, if one believes in that entity. But I'm curious as to how you are so prolific. How does all of this just come to you through a thought, an idea, and you sit down and you put pen to paper and that's it? Or is there a revision process where you have a thought, a little seed, and you put it down on paper and you go back and you just keep fine-tuning it? How does that work with any writer?
That's a great question, Catherine. Great question. And I think with me, I get the idea of something I want to write about, to think about. So I want to think about it more, and I want to figure it out, so I know I have to write about it. And then I can look at it and maybe try and understand it, or somehow incorporate it into my experience. So my darkest poems come from trying to figure out what happened. How come it hurts so much? What did I do? How do I go forward from it? What did I learn? How did I contribute? All of the questions we ask ourselves, and in hopes of learning and maybe just, becoming a little bit smarter about the things we do. And that's not always possible either. Poems are not magic, but they do help me when I've got something that I want to tease apart and really look at. And there's no end to the material. I mean, I remember once I was mentoring somebody, and she said, how do you know, don't you ever run out of what to write about?
Huh.
And I thought to myself, my God, never, never. I've got notebooks full of ideas that I want to go back. I really need to write about that. I really need to write about those pink Angora mittens, or I really need to write about why it hurt so much when I saw him that day, or a million things. There's just never an end for me. And maybe that's good fortune. Or maybe that's just paying attention. Jean Cocteau said, the poet doesn't invent, she listens. And I think I'm always listening to my life, and I'm always watching others too. Yeah. That's about as close as I can come.
Okay, may I ask another question? I don't want to take up anybody else's time if somebody else wants to interject.
Go ahead, Kath.
I've always, obviously, poetry is a great aspect of our life to express ourselves, but I've always been very curious as to why more people don't gravitate towards poetry, why they do not receive it the way they would receive the next best-selling novel of fiction, or why don't they connect to poetry on that level? I mean, when it comes to the 10 best books or the 10 best written word of any year, poetry is never included in that. And I always wonder, is it because people do not understand it, or is it because it's very raw and a lot of people can't accept it? They don't go there. They just don't want to hear it. They don't want to talk about it.
I think there is a bias against poetry. And I think the world tends to see poets a different way from novelists or essayists. And unfairly so, I think. Prose writers, and I love to write prose, I love to write essays, particularly personal essays, and they're really tough. And they're different, but just as tough as poems. They're just longer. And I think that there's a bias against poems being short, succinct, not necessarily with concrete beginnings and endings. And they also bring up things that a lot of people are uncomfortable thinking about. I mean, when a poem makes you uncomfortable, the poet is succeeding because he's making you look at something that you hadn't looked at before. That's success. If somebody says to me, I never thought about it that way, I wonder why I did that, or because of a poem I wrote, again, I've gone to heaven. I've just gone to heaven. So yeah, the bias is that they're short, they're contained within a smaller world, and for that reason, there just might be a bias that exists, and it's too bad, but it does.
Good answer, great question. Davita's been raising her hand for a while, so I'll just ask her to unmute and ask her question, but I'll also read Tuna's question in the chat after.
Okay.
So Davita, go ahead.
Yes, I wondered how your location affects your poetry. Whether you're
That's
on
a fantastic question.
Yeah,
that's a fantastic question.
Yeah, if you're on a boat or if you're on an island or if you're in Canada.
Or in a snowbank. Because believe me, I've been in a few in the last couple of months. Davida, that's a great question. And I do tend to write about the place where I'm at, as you know, on the island, because you've listened to me with, my poems about the island and the tidal pools and the colors of the sea and the pages that the sea, the pages of the book that the waves of the sea send me. And here, having spent this winter for the first time in so many years here in Canada, I've been writing about the cold. I've been writing about being contained and isolated, combined with the COVID, of course, and restricted. And those things are coming through in my writing too. There's a freedom that a warm climate provides, an ease. And I think, I hesitate to say this, but you just made me think, I wonder if the cold produces more intense poetry, because it certainly produces more intense everything else. I'm thinking there might be something there.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for the question. Okay, so Tunda's question is, how do you still keep your positivity that shines through everything you write?
Oh, Tunda, I'm glad you think so. I tend to think that I'm, my stuff is so, I'm amazed anyone can ask a question after I read, these poems, that they're not, I haven't made the audience lapse into catatonia because of the despair. So if there's a positivity, I'm really happy to hear that. I don't know, I don't try to combat the negativity. I don't try to tamp it down. I don't try to make them happier or more positive. Don't do a lot of editing. I might edit a line length or words or where stanzas break, but I don't, my intent remains the same throughout the writing. And if the positivity comes through, it's interesting to hear that it does, but it's not an intentional, it just must be a part of me that's coming through with the along with the sadness.
Thanks for the question, Tunda. I'm not seeing anything else, Trish, so if maybe you want to say a last few words, unless someone pops up with a question.
Does anyone else have a question or a comment? Anyone at all?
Yes, I do. As Tunda has stated, you do have a great positivity through your writing, and it does shine through. And there's a really underlying element of sadness in your poetry. But yet, through the sadness, there is such a strong kindness in your words. It's almost like redeeming someone for their faults, or redeeming someone for their misadventures, or their addiction, or their problems in life. And it's not a judgmental style. It's very uplifting in its way of understanding people, that we're not perfect and that we all have struggles, and some are strong and some are weak. And that is what I found most profound about your reading, was that the sadness is overcome by the kindness in your words.
Mm.
It's a great comment.
That's lovely. That's lovely, Catherine. It's a lovely thing to hear.
Paula has a question in the chat. She said that was such a moving and heartfelt journey. What advice do you have for keeping one's thoughts of self-doubt or fear from finishing or sharing one's poetry?
Hello, Paula. Dear Paula.
Hi, Tricia. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
That's a very thoughtful question. How do we keep ourselves from editing too much? Editing what we write? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, or just kind of like self-sabotage, you know, like when you're delving and diving into such deep and vulnerable feelings of, you know, anger or sadness or shame or guilt. I find that sometimes it can kind of self-sabotage efforts to try to make it into something beautiful. And it little like, you know, the voice can literally say, well, what you're writing is not good enough, or like, you know, people are gonna judge you for this, or like, how do you, and I feel like that's part of why I think, you know, when you speak, it's such a luminous voice because you put into words what is so universally felt, right? And there's such like an element of bravery and sharing. And I'm just wondering like how yeah, like how do you, you know, keep your kind of self, you know, like feelings of self-doubt about writing certain pieces? Like how do you keep that from interfering with you know, finishing a work or sharing it with the world?
I understand. Yes, I understand completely. I think I can't think about how people are going to see me. I think as a poet, I can't think about someone's judgment or whether I seem weak or fickle or selfish, because all of those things I am in, you know, in turn, and I write about it. But I think that's why it's universal, because I think we're always told to just talk about our best selves. But I'm many different people. And so when I write about the weak side of myself, or the, um, um, I would say, judgmental side, I just let it fly. I just let it fly. I don't edit it. And I kind of cringe. And if I'm cringing and I finished a poem and I read it, I thought, God, that's really, that's bone on bone. I think it's going to be a good poem, or it is a good poem. Paula, don't think about judgment. Think about what you want to say, what you want from your heart to put on the page, what truth you've discovered that you feel you want to share. And it can be ugly. It can be, it can be, it can be anything, but it's yours. And it's only if it's yours when the poem will be really good. That's the overarching comment.
That's
When it's
wonderful. That's
truly
such good
yours.
advice. Thank you,
And when it's
Tricia. That
yours,
makes a lot
Paula,
of sense.
because you're such an artist yourself, that what you have to contribute is so worthwhile, and you should just let it fly. And if somebody doesn't like it or doesn't like your poetry, they move on to somebody else. There's lots to choose from. And I've had people say, why do you bother writing those stories? And I say, because I can't not. Because I can't not. And when you feel you can't not, that's when you're going to sit down, put the pen on the paper, and just write. Write for Paula and no one else.
Oh, thank you, Tricia. It's very good advice.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Doug has a few questions for you, Trish, as well as Jill has one, but we'll start with Doug. Doug wants to know, what is your idea of perfect happiness?
I would say perfect happiness lately are golden Oreos, not chocolate Oreos, which are, you know, they're okay. Golden Oreos have a particular aura. They're really good. Perfect happiness, my God, I don't know if I know it. Perfect happiness would be a 1969 Mustang restored, fire engine red. Being able to go back to the life we once had, that would be pretty perfectly happy too, I think, for all of us. And I think we'll probably end up having existences that have been forever altered because of COVID. And I think we will notice, at least for a time, what can make us happy that we just overlooked before, because we had so much of everything. Without question, we had everything offered and available. And when that's not available, when it's taken away for the first time in any of our lives, that's when we look more closely to see where the value is.
Another question from Doug. He wants to know what you thought of the poet laureate Amanda Gorman's reading at the inauguration.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
How can anyone be so wise, Doug? At, what is she, 22? It's ridiculous. She's an old soul, and they do exist. And what causes them to have access to that kind of wisdom? I don't know. It's a freak of nature. It's a wonderful freak of nature. But she just held herself so well. She had such grace to have that at 22. I mean, I was such a spaz at 22. I just looked at her and I just admire her so much. I thought she was astounding. And the poetry that is read at these things, I mean, Maya Angelou also, I mean, I just love to see poetry recognized in that way with such a wide audience and respected in the way that it is. People that have never heard poetry before listen to these events and they hear it maybe for the first time, and it's a wonderful thing.
Jill says, you share so much of yourself in your writing. Adding to Paula's thoughts, do you keep many poems aside that you feel are just not enough or maybe too much?
Hi, Jill.
Hi.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. There are things that I don't write about because I feel it would be indiscreet. There are pieces that I would like to share, but and they'll go nameless because they would hurt someone. They would compromise someone in a way that I wouldn't want to. So yes, I do have poems that I haven't shared and won't share, but that I needed to write. And there's a value in that also, because you can't write to thinking about how many people are going to read it, because there's no guarantee of that at all, whether anyone will care. But I have set aside many over the years, yes, to fill many books, yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jill.
Thank you. This was like a shot of Red Bull to the soul, listening to you tonight.
Hans, did you have a question?
Yeah, yes, I did. I wrote it down.
Oh, you wrote it.
Yeah.
From...
Sorry, I'm on Tunde's screen, so that's why.
Oh, yes, of course. Hello.
Hi, how are you? It was great.
Hello.
So my question was...
I'm well. Thank you for coming.
You have such a good presentation voice, too. It makes the poems even more convincing. I wonder whether we could look forward to having more of them on YouTube, so we can go back to them. It's different from reading your poems again. Seeing you read them is even better. So put them on YouTube or more of them.
Absolutely going to.
Would be great.
Haley's recording this tonight.
Oh, fantastic.
Because we were incredibly well organized, I would say, because we thought about recording it. And then Doug, my webmaster, which always sounds a little bit odd, my webmaster said, and my friend said, do it on Zoom and keep the numbers down, which I did intentionally, because he said there will be a lot of technical problems if the numbers get too many. So he said, but record it and put it on your YouTube channel after. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. And I'd like to do more of these. This is my first Zoom poetry reading. And it was Lynn O'Donnell in Antigonish who suggested it. And it hadn't occurred to me. I mean, I've read for YouTube and left it there on my channel, but live, I mean, and I just love reading my work. I don't know why, it just didn't occur to me. So thanks, Lynn, for the idea.
One last observation, not really a question. And it may be too, it may be a bit too pertinent or a bit too, I don't mean it to be critical. Absolutely, there's no criticism involved. But my question involved a poem called All the Silent Girls.
Yes.
I wrote down all the poems you read, and little notes regarding them all. But the one that struck me was All the Silent Girls, and we can all remember young women of that of those characters. But you never mentioned mothers in your poem. You mentioned fathers and uncles about being dismissive or cruel or abusive. And my question is, mothers somewhat could take responsibility for some of this, for some of their the situation that they found themselves in. So I just want, was that a conscious thought not to include a mother, or was it just it didn't cross your mind? I mean, obviously, you know, we're not castigating mothers at this point, but
right.
So your thoughts on that?
Catherine, it was something I didn't even think about till you've mentioned it this second. And I think the experience I had in terms of those silent girls was that it was usually coming out of a male-dominated society, patriarchy, especially in the times when we grew up. And, you know, the dominant male, females without a voice, so long, you know, 40 years before the Me Too movement. So it wasn't something I even thought about mothers, certainly. Good and bad mothers abound. But no, in writing that, it didn't occur to me. The girls that I knew, that I worked with, that I went to school with, the ones that were troubled were subject to male punishment, you know, male abuse. And that was what I saw. I think and I will say fare thee well. And I think I will read one more poem before I go in parting, because that's always the best way to say fare thee well. And let me just see. This is a deeply, these are, okay, what I'll do is I will read a poem for my mother and one for my father, neither of which are very long, but I can't read one without another. So my mother and father were gone too soon, and it seems like it's been 1,000 years since I saw them. But as I said in a poem that I didn't read tonight, we learn and we learn. With every goodbye, we learn. This is from my father. It's called The Dark. I want to not leave him alone there at the end of the first night's viewing, realizing as I tell my brother this, how ridiculous I must sound, and nodding in compliance when he says, "That's not our father, not anymore." But when I drive out of the funeral home parking lot and see the last light go off inside, plunging the place into darkness, my breath sticks in my throat, remembering how father lit the nightlight in the hallway outside his bedroom every single night this past year since my mother died. And this is for mother. Starting over. I would replace the finger you lost on your right hand, working in munitions during the war. You always hid away that hand. Gone would be a troubled older brother, sneaking into your room at night, and his oblivious mother. There'd be school past the age of 9, where you'd learn to trust your voice, question authority, emerging a woman no longer destined to defer, to bow. Let's start over. Here's a fighting chance. Hell, Mom, here's a head start. Thank you, everyone, for coming, listening so faithfully, and continuing to read my poems. And if you'd like to do another one, just send me an email and let me know. And thank you.